John, we've got a very special show lined up for everybody tonight. It's interesting, as I look across the spectrum of a number of different technological providers that are involved in bringing this show to everybody, each of them are experiencing some strange disruption today. What we're going to do, in part, in consideration of that and other things, we want to give everybody a sample of what we're doing every Friday. Before we get into that, how are you, John?
I'm well. How are you, Jason? You feeling okay?
I feel fine. I mean, other than the economy collapsing and not being able to walk out of my apartment without a virtual guarantee of a confrontation and at least a 50% chance of that confrontation becoming violent or being with the police who could arrest me for simply standing too close to somebody. Nice hat, by the way. Those things aside, I'm doing great.
All right. Well, again, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
But what's interesting now that we're in the middle of May is it's like the books have been written, right? The numbers are in. And we started talking about this stuff in late February, early March, March, April, mid-May, right? So we're coming up on 10 weeks. And what's interesting is the data that I've been accessing, right? And again, for the audience that's not familiar with me and my background, I have a background in databases and things of that nature. And when Jason and I first started talking about the coronavirus outbreak, I just thought it was a respiratory virus outbreak like MERS or SARS or something else. And I didn't really give it a whole lot of deep thought. And I was just looking at it at the surface. And Jason encouraged me to take a second look. And as Jason started exploring New York City, and I was watching in a lot of the videos when you were walking around New York with your rig, both with Charles and by yourself, and I was watching that, and your cognitive dissonance when you were over by the hospitals and when you were over by Jacob Javits, it's like you knew something's wrong. You know something's not right.
Yeah.
Something's definitely off, right? And yet we're trying to piece it together. We're trying to figure out, okay, what is it? What is actually playing out here? Because the story that we're being told, it just doesn't add up. Right. And if that's the case, then what we now get to do, based on the benefit of your body of research, my body of research, Michael Moore's body of research, right? You look at all the guys that you've been working with, your whole family of journalists that you work with, and now we start to pull all the stuff together. And it's unreal. I mean, I was saying to you earlier today, Michael Moore's had some amazing breaks in the last week, just some, amazing stuff, so hats off to him, tip of the hat to Michael and to you. But now we get to kind of pull this stuff together, and we have the benefit now of a little bit of hindsight, and we have the benefit of some records, right? We have the benefit of data.
Yeah.
And so now we start to piece these things together. And some of the hunches and some of the cognitive dissonance that we all had early on, now we're going to start to see, well, yeah, this is, this adds up. This makes sense. And so I think as we piece this together tonight, I really think it's coming together rather clearly. But again, I'm not going to broadcast to the audience what I think is happening. We're going to put the evidence on the table. We're going to discuss it. We're going to sort through it. We're going to put it into a couple different piles and let everybody decide, what do you think is happening here? And what we're talking about is the coronavirus outbreak, and in particular, how has it been managed by a handful of states, really? Tonight we're going to investigate maybe 4 or 5 states in particular. And if you go to that deck that I sent you, one of the things, again, that we get to benefit from here is this body of research that we've been working on. And so one of the things I do sometimes is I go back and watch the old stuff, and it's painful. Watching your old videos and listening to your own voice, it's painful. But I do it anyway. And if we go back to some of the charts, so just go to the next page in the deck here if you can. Just
well, before we get too deep into the deck, John, I want to remind our viewers that normally you and I are doing this show on Fridays on patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And also, we're both on Subscribestar. I encourage people to check out Subscribestar. A lot of viewers have told me they've had a better experience if they have a lower powered computer. The interface is a little bit simpler for some people to navigate, and they're having kind of a better technical support experience on there. So if anybody is having issues with Patreon, they can go to Subscribestar. It's also important for Crowdsource the Truth viewers to know about the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. Tonight's YouTube broadcast is being simulcast on John's channel, and of course people can check out John's entire library of work, all of our simulcast videos, as well as his independent research into the coronavirus outbreak, the pandemic, as well as his research into the Las Vegas shooting. John's got a huge library of videos here, so if you're not yet subscribed to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, you definitely want to go over there and check that out. And so back to the deck.
Yeah, indeed. And I think tonight what we're going to do, I think as you mentioned this earlier, so as folks are joining, typically we do this show on YouTube either 5 p.m. East Coast time or 6 p.m. East Coast time or 8 o'clock East Coast time based on how jam-packed our schedules are. However, we usually break away for our patron-only hour about 20-25 minutes into this. And so tonight, what we're going to do is we're just going to let it roll. So we're going to go for a full hour 15, hour 20, and consider this kind of a preview. This is what it looks like when Jason and I go to the patron-only hour. So you guys are going to go in depth tonight. This is kind of what it looks like when we go patron-only. And typically we go patron-only because I'm sharing stuff that's just so unreal. They'll take my videos down, and I've had 2 videos tonight. Yeah. You there?
I just lost you for a second. Yeah. Nice hat, by the way, as well. We have
same hat. Same hat.
No. The one in the corner there, the Corona Extra hat. I also noticed you've readjusted your composition, perhaps inspired by Dr. Fauci, who was being photographed from the top down. So it's a new look.
Yeah. I moved some things around, give myself a little more room in here. So, again, tonight we've got some really interesting information to share, and I want to kind of kick it off with a piece of information that you don't know yet. So I didn't share this with you during the week. So this is going to be new for you. And I think your eyebrows are going to go halfway to the moon when you hear this. In last week's show, we went to our patron-only hour to show everybody that a certain website that the CDC had been taken down. And it was a website that you and I had featured, and we showed it. And I had been using it to access some of the data. And when I went to get back into it and I noticed it was down, I was like, well, what the heck is going on here? And I started making a whole bunch of noise about it being down in the comments and all that kind of stuff. Well, lo and behold, in last week's show, we get to the patron-only hour, and the website's back up.
Yeah.
And I felt like I disappointed the audience because the website wasn't broken, and it's back up, and there it is. Okay, so we moved on in the show, and we went on to the rest of the deck. All right, well, after the show, during the week, I went back to the website. It's another illusion. Again. Yeah, they put it back up, and they took out 2019's data.
Oh, really?
So it's back, but now it only goes to 2018. And you can no longer access the 2019 mortality data, meaning the run-up of influenza we don't get to see. All right, so where are we right now? All right, so over the course of the last 2.5 months or so, I keep talking about COVID versus the influenza outbreak and how the influenza outbreak was rather dramatic. And that before we really had even 5,000 people dead from COVID, we already had just about 100,000 dead from influenza, making this season the worst influenza outbreak since the Spanish flu in 1918. Certainly rivaling the outbreak in 1968 of the Hong Kong flu. So the data you have on the screen right now is the latest download from the CDC, right from, and we'll go to the website and I'll show you where I get this in a minute. And this shows that there are, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it just tallies up how many people are dead. Whoa. And this is influenza this season.
So, but this has been eliminated. This is data that you downloaded and stored.
This is data that I clicked on, downloaded, tallied up today.
Got it.
So this is fresh as of today. And what's that bottom line total? I can't read it from where I am.
144,222.
That's how many people are dead this season from influenza and related pneumonia. It's called PNI. We talked about PNI in the past. So that's the influenza number. Now that started in October of 2019. And when we got to January, we already had 45,000 people dead. Then, beginning in January, we don't have a single week where there's less than 4,000 people dying of influenza. Every single week, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000 for 12 weeks in a row. And then it gets worse. So what's happened is we've had an unbelievable influenza outbreak while we've been going through this COVID outbreak. So two things have been happening at the same time, right? And so the question is, if you were to get a new puppy, do you stop feeding your cat? No, of course not, right? You got to continue to feed the cat if you get a new puppy, okay? Yeah. Well, a new disease shows up, and we're in the midst of an unbelievable outbreak of influenza, and yet the behavior that I'm about to show you evidence of is remarkable. So let's go to the next page in the deck, because we've got 144,000 people dead from influenza, all right? When we get real specific and we put a point on it, we go to New Jersey, and Governor, what's his name? Phil Murphy, former Goldman Sachs guy, right?
Yes.
Bordering on a billionaire. I think he's worth $700 million, give or take. That buys a lot of cigarettes at Allenwood Federal Penitentiary. If you scroll down, what you're going to see is New Jersey stopped reporting altogether on influenza on February the 29th was their final report. And so the question is, if you're in the midst of a massive influenza outbreak that of epic proportion, and yes, there's a new virus is coming out, yes, but this is February 29th. When the president declared a national emergency on March 12th or 14th, I forget the exact date, but it was mid-March, March 12th or March 14th-ish. President declares national emergency in all 50 states. And on that day, that was when Mike Pompeo was on the stage. And Mike Pompeo said, we're in a live exercise. Right? Or a live drill, whatever the terminology was that he used. At that moment, the board on the stage said 204 people were dead in America. So we had 204 people dead when we declared a national emergency in all 50 states. And that was mid-March. This is late February. So February 29th is the final influenza report that comes. And that's it. They don't even make an effort to pretend to play the game like you're going to see with the other states. So when we go to New York at least knows how to pretend to look like they're doing their homework. And you'll see that, it's like they think they're fooling somebody. And you'll see that when we go to the next page when we go to New York. So let's flip over to the next page, next slide. Okay, so here's New York. And what's fascinating about New York is, I think you have to zoom out or scroll down just a touch on that slide to really get to the meat of it. Yeah. All right. So what happens is, what's fascinating about New York is showing you the 2019-2020 season side by side with the last 3 seasons prior. And what you see is this sudden drop off in influenza case deaths. And so the question is, did they find a cure? Did something miraculous happen in New York this season that hasn't happened in any of those prior seasons? You look at the prior seasons. I don't know if the audience can see those numbers and what happened in that week. Can you zoom in a little bit on that lower right-hand corner there where I think there's some arrows? Can you guys see that? There you go. Let's see if we can get to the specifics in here. Can you guys see what that says? I don't know. I can't see it from here. I don't know if
I think it's talking about week 12. You got 2,000. So what are the columns here from left to right? This size drop off never happened
previous
before.
Years.
Okay.
Right. So these are previous years.
Week 12 in the previous years. So we're talking about, 2,358. In the following year, 2,708. Then it shoots up to 6,678. And then what the hell is this? 3,366. That is a made-up 33 number right there.
But look what happens after that week. Look how in 2019,
and
2020,
it goes down to, I see what you're saying. It
falls
goes down
off
to
the
764.
cliff.
I don't believe any of these numbers, John. I don't believe any of these numbers.
All right. Well, whether you believe any of the numbers is really not the question.
Right.
The question is, if these prior 3 years, just take that in, right? You see, zoom out a little bit, you'll see the second column has a bit of darkness in it, showing that was the 2017-2018 season, right? So that was the year we had 60,000 people dead, right? So now when you look at 2019-2020, it looks like it's actually worse than 2017-2019 as far as the dark shading. There's more numbers in there. There's more people in there in New York. This is New York. So it looks like New York is having a rougher go of it in 2019-2020 than they did in what was the year where we had 80,000 people die, according to Dr. Fauci. So Dr. Fauci said in 2017-2018, 80,000 people died of influenza. And it appears 2019-2020 is worse, and yet in week 12, something miraculous happens in New York. And so the question is, that was March 31st, first week in April. So did New York all of a sudden start distributing Tamiflu to all of the influenza patients? Or, I don't know, is $52,000 worth of incentive reason enough to say, that's not influenza, it's COVID. Come on.
Who's getting $52,000 incentive?
Well, if you're admitted, it's 13,000, and if you're intubated, it's 39,000.
But I don't think they add the 39. I think that's the differential. It's 26,000 additional. But I hear what you're saying.
39 is the max? Okay.
Yeah. So let me address that for 1 second, John. I don't want to take us too far off, but the creative process is interesting and the audience is not that privy to it. But, you sort of suggest an idea and then I come up with the graphic. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but I feel very confident that some of these doctors that I've been questioning for the past 2 months, Colleen Smith, Kyle Seidel, this nurse, Nicole Citroek, who I have not been able to reach despite her claims that she's trying to get this word out and she can't. All these people, I believe, have been involved in a social engineering scheme that's designed to funnel money into the New York health and hospital system, not just from the admission of COVID patients and the payouts from Medicaid or Medicare or whatever that is. But 2 days ago, the new White House press secretary announced that $3 billion was going to go from the federal government to 390 some odd hospitals distributed on the basis of how many underinsured patients they took care of. So this is going to be a windfall of millions of dollars into these hospitals.
Well, I mean, Nancy Pelosi is talking about trillions of dollars. So when you talk about $3 billion, $3 billion is a rounding error to Nancy Pelosi. She's talking about trillions. What I see here, though, when I look at this chart, and again, this is New York's books, this is their report. I added the red stuff, right? But the question is, why, how, all of a sudden, did your influenza deaths just drop off the cliff like that? Is there an explanation from who's that director of health in New York who said, I don't give a damn about the cops, right? That's a director
Osiris,
of health.
What's her name?
All right, so that director of health.
Barbeau.
My question is, what happened in week 12 that you guys went from the midst of one of the worst influenza outbreaks I've seen to you don't give a damn about the cops and there's very few influenza deaths? How did you pull that off? Was that medication? Was that treatment? What happened that all of a sudden those numbers just stopped?
Doesn't she?
I don't know who Fred. I told you I don't watch television. I wouldn't know who that is. All right, so let's go back though, because this gets even deeper and crazier. So now go back to the deck, right?
Just real quick. There he is.
Oh, that's Fred. Fred. Okay, that's not nice. Come on. All right.
I'm just
Fred
making
Armisen
an
and drag. Fred Armisen and drag. Okay. All right. So this is New York. All right. So now let's go to the next slide. Go to the next slide, because this hole just these guys just dug their own hole. All right, so here's our friends in Michigan, all right? And this is their influenza report for, I can't read the week. It's a little blurry at my end.
Oh,
what does it say as far as?
It's week 21. Your feed depends on how strong your internet signal is today.
Yeah, don't worry about that. So the net of it is, this is Michigan and their influenza season, right? And what kind of experience are they having in Michigan? Right? Are they having a reasonable influenza season, or are they having an extreme influenza season? And then what happens to their reports? Right? So let's go to the next slide.
You got
it? Can you see it?
Yeah, I see it. Are you not getting it?
Oh. I can kind of make it out. I know what it is. All right, so I'll just talk to it.
Right.
I don't know if you want to throw it up full screen for the audience or something, so they can see the detail.
It's full screen for the audience. The video feed that you get is coming from a separate thing.
I got you.
Your VPN today is just doing whatever.
Yeah, no sweat. All right, so what this is a week-by-week accounting of COVID on one side of the chart and influenza on the other side of the chart. And it's really the only way to keep track of how many people died when from each. And there's two different websites that we have to go to the CDC in order to get this data. So I go to one site to get the COVID deaths. And when you go there, they mix in a whole bunch of other superfluous stuff that you really just don't want to see. They combine COVID with this and COVID with influenza and COVID with pneumonia and we don't need all that. We need two numbers from there. And I get those two numbers and I put that on the left side of the table. On the right side, we go to a different website and we get the influenza mortality numbers. And when I line them up week by week by week, what you see is that as coronavirus really starts to take off, it's the first week of April. And that's when we have about 4,000 people dead. And when that happens, we've got almost 100,000 people dead already from influenza. Then as we go into April, what happens is a big number of people die from coronavirus, about 65,000, give or take, 70,000 people. And about half of that die from influenza in the month of April, right? So if we had 100,000 or 95,000 coming into April, and 32,000 or so die, 35,000 die of influenza in April. That means we leave April and enter May with about 140,000. That's where we are now, at 144,000. So those influenza numbers do not include coronavirus. The coronavirus numbers are over on the left side. And what you see is the coronavirus numbers are discrete, and most of the deaths occurred in April. Right? We had a massive outbreak in April. But if you go back a couple weeks, there's really not that much happening. So very, very big outbreak in a very short period of time. But influenza had already racked up about 100,000 deaths. So now we're sitting at 144,000 dead from influenza currently, PNI. And what's the number on the panic map from Johns Hopkins right now? 88, 90,000 on the
Let me
big
bring it
red
up.
panic map. Yeah, why not? Let's see what we got.
The COVID map. I feel like we've been looking at that less frequently, but it's worth taking a look at.
It's interesting to say that too.
Why?
Because it's being featured less in the news. They're working this out of the news cycle because we're catching them and we're pointing out the websites that they're taking down, and they're trying to stay a step ahead. And then we see that, they took the website down, they put it back up without last year's data in it.
Yeah.
What is that what kind of move is that? It's like, and I'll tell you what, if I hadn't gone back to query the data, I don't think I would have noticed.
Yeah.
And I went back in and said, okay.
People were suggesting that it might have been blocking because of your VPN being out of the country or something like that. And that made sense to me. No. I was just, we were surprised last week.
They took it down. They put it back up. We thought all was fine. And then when I went in to query the results, all of the 2019 data is gone. It only goes to 2018, and we're in 2020. So, yeah, that doesn't make sense. All right, so how many folks do we have dead in America right now? USA.
USA, it's saying 87,493.
All right, so call it 88,000, coming up on 90,000 people dead, and 145,000 dead from influenza. So 235,000 people this season, meaning if we start in October 2019 until now, May 15th, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, along with a tremendous assist from Governor Cuomo's Whitmer, Murphy, Newsom, and whoever the governor is in Massachusetts and Connecticut, it's just astounding. So I want to go back to the deck, and I want to show everybody something that you and I showed people 4 weeks ago. That now go to the next page if you would, yeah. And I want to show everybody one of these charts that we were looking at. So this is one of the places I go to get the data. This is the provisional death count website, and this is one of the CDC links, and this is where I go to get the COVID deaths. So when people want to know where you're getting these COVID statistics from, I'm getting them from the CDC. I go to their website, and I just showed you guys the link up there on the screen, and that's where I'm getting the COVID data from. But they're mixing in a whole bunch of superfluous stuff here to make it a little bit more confusing. So I just use the data that we need, which is the COVID deaths and the related pneumonia that's tagged to COVID. And that's all we need from here. And so now let's go to the next page, and I'll show you what else we used. Next page in the deck.
Sorry, I was just distracted by a comment from JF saying non-mask wearing people in San Antonio, Texas are being attacked. Local leaders put pressure on stores to go against the Republican governor Abbott, stating masks are encouraged but not mandatory. That's interesting. People are asking me to go do more walkarounds, and I will, but I'm concerned about my safety because people in New York are also being attacked for not wearing masks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry.
I want a Kim Kardashian mask. Make me good looking.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So these are some of the observations that I've made looking at that data. So that spreadsheet I just showed you a second ago, these are some of the observations. I can't read that. Can you read those observations?
Yeah.
Because this is really kind of pivotal.
Sure. It says in 2020, since January 1st, we have approximately 80,000 dead from COVID-19 and 95,000 dead from influenza PNI. And then you've got A, says beginning first week in January, more people have died and more than 4,000 people have died every week from influenza, not COVID-19. By mid to late January, USA deaths from influenza exceeded Vietnam War deaths for the second time since 2017 and 2018. And point
Okay,
C,
so hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on to that thought for a second. Dr. Fauci has been in this role for 30-something years and 5 presidents. For the second time since 2017, 2018, since you and I started our relationship and we met on the Las Vegas shooting, it was that season. That season that started October 2017, 2.5 years ago, we had 80,000 people die. Only 54,000 combat deaths in Vietnam by comparison. And think about how upset America was about Vietnam. Think about how we, everything that went on to try and stop that war, and how, the impact that it had on America after the fact. Same with Korea, same with Iraq, same with Afghanistan. And you look at, 80,000 people dead 2 years ago, and nobody seems to care. And now this season, the point that you just made is we just passed that same threshold again. More people dead in a flu season than we lost in the entire Vietnam War to combat. I think we need to start paying a little bit more attention to this stuff. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. What was the next point?
Point C says, as April, week 14 begins, sorry, let me bring that back so everybody can see it. The United States already has 100,000 dead from influenza for the season. Point D tells us the United States had approximately 60 to 70,000 deaths in April from COVID-19, and about 50% of that number from influenza, approximately 3,500 from P&I in April alone. And then point E tells us
35,000.
Yeah,
35,000. Yeah.
Sorry. Tamiflu /
Oseltamivir.
Oseltamivir is effective against H1N1, yet we have more dead than the first 100 years.
So 144,000 people dead with an influenza outbreak where Tamiflu is effective. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Why would that happen? Why would we let that happen? Why would Dr. Fauci let that happen? And that's the part I just don't get it. I don't understand it. But these are the observations from studying that data, that table. And I'll be posting that later on Patreon and Subscribestar. I'll post the spreadsheets and all these documents and that stuff. Let's go to the next slide if you can. Okay, so this is an example of some of the reporting that we're getting out of some of the states, right? And one of the things you see are these very, very steep drop-offs in influenza deaths, coincident with, and I'm not saying that, it's causal or there's a connection, but it's coincident with this bounty being announced of $39,000 for intubated coronavirus patients. And so the question I keep asking to people that I know in the medical field and to the audience who's in the medical field, if you had a patient that had severe coronavirus and you had a patient that had severe H1N1, bed A, bed B, how would they present differently? They both have a fever. They're both showing signs of pneumonia, right? They both have acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. How do they present differently from a doctor's perspective? If I've got an H1N1 patient here and a coronavirus patient over here, how do I tell the difference besides the testing?
Yeah, the test.
Well, other than the test, if I can't get tests, if the tests are too slow, if assume that there's a problem with the tests, how do I tell? Can I tell? Don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is it seems like these particular states started showing a tremendous disinterest in influenza patients.
Well,
New
every
Jersey stopped
patient
reporting.
who's not coronavirus. I've heard personal stories from people whose cancer surgeries have been delayed.
No. I don't want to talk about personal stories. I want to talk about data. I want to talk
Numbers, right?
about hard facts. Hard facts right here show us New Jersey stopped reporting on influenza altogether, and New York pretended like it tapered off, except the numbers that they use don't represent a taper. So that's who do they think they're fooling? They didn't fool anybody. It's nonsense. So we're going to see more and more examples of this from places like Michigan, California. So let's keep going. These are hard facts. So all the other hearsay stuff, we don't need it anymore. We don't need hearsay. We've got this. We've got their data, and they screwed up, and we've got them dead to rights. So let's go to the next slide.
Now we're into the information that we had originally intended to present for patrons only.
Exactly.
So here we go.
This is where we go. Right. So this is where we start going deep. Right. So this is where we're going to go into.
So real quick, John, Kelly on Periscope is asking us, John said this data is wrong, ? And it's not that you're saying that it's wrong. You're just saying this is their data that they're making their decisions from. So we're evaluating it from the standpoint that it's true. We're not questioning the truth or falsity of it. We're just saying they consider it true, so let's look at it from the standpoint of being true and point out the problems with it, even if it's true.
Right. The first thing we have to do is we have to just put all the evidence on the table. Pretend like we've got a huge conference table, and we're just putting evidence on the table and trying to sort it and put it into piles of similar stuff to make the story. We don't have to solve everything today, tonight, tomorrow. They're not going anywhere. The perpetrators behind this aren't going anywhere. So the idea is when we pull all this together and we start looking at the facts, it's so hard for them to escape these facts. That's why they took the whole damn database down. And when they put it back up, they just omitted an entire year's worth of data. Right?
Spoliation of evidence.
Yeah, exactly. So that just goes to show you how close we are to this, right? We are very close to the target, or they wouldn't bother. All right, so we're now going to go deeper into the CDC. So the stuff you're going to see tonight, folks, may not be there tomorrow. All right, this is why Jason and I do this on the patron-only hour. But it does appear that people at the CDC are watching our patron-only stuff, because when we showed the Wonder database, it was patron-only. So they're subscribing, which is creepy. Thanks for the $3, guys, you bastards. Yeah. All right, next slide.
Coming right out of Fauci's budget.
Exactly. All right. So again, what this is showing, and this is what we're going to get into as we dig a little bit deeper here, is how week to week to week we're going to track influenza and coronavirus. Right? We can take care of a new puppy and our cat at the same time. We're going to count both because we're adults and we can do that.
Yeah.
For some reason, these directors of health at New York, New Jersey, Michigan are just absolutely overwhelmed by an infection that for a 4 or 5 week period was, remarkably impactful. But compared to the influenza outbreak, it's nominal. I mean, there's no comparison. Let's go to the next slide, if you could.
I want to share something with you briefly, John, and the rest of the audience, while we're talking about this, who's watching the show thing. Do you know who this is? Can you see this?
I can't see it. No.
Oh,
I can't see it.
Allison Fauci on Twitter.
Allison?
Fauci for the win. This is the 33-year-old daughter of Dr. Anthony Fauci, who I discovered on Twitter just the other night. And within less than 30 seconds of following her, I was blocked.
Well, there you go. You're
notorious.
But I
noticed that she, despite having about 1,000 followers, very, very few followers, she was followed by Adam Schiff. But not just the regular Adam Schiff. She was followed by an Adam Schiff account that I was previously unaware of, and I've done quite a bit of searching around for Adam Schiff. Maybe I just missed this. That's certainly possible. But this is Adam Schiff standing strong. She didn't block Adam Schiff, but she blocked Jason Goodman. This is Adam Schiff, U.S. House candidate,
Got the blue check.
CA28, blue check mark, 440,000 followers, far fewer than his rep Adam Schiff account. But I found that interesting.
I don't understand. Why would somebody just block you because you followed them?
She didn't just block me. She put her whole entire Twitter account to protected. So if people go there now, you can't even see what she had there the other night because all of her tweets are protected. What do you think of that?
That's weird. You know, I don't want to get into the doctor's personal life and his family, just as I don't want anybody getting into my personal life and my family. So I'll respect that with the doctor, but I'm going to hold him accountable. That's for sure. So, you know, I want to talk about what he's done.
The only reason I raise it, John, is because working at Twitter puts her in a really interesting position to be one of these digital gatekeepers. I didn't know she worked at Twitter. She works I didn't know she worked at Twitter. Oh. She works at Twitter.
I didn't get that.
And obviously either doesn't want anybody who isn't Adam Schiff or someone she already knows following her and is super on top of that, or specifically doesn't want me following her. And when I followed her, nobody else can look at the tweets now.
I'd love to know. I mean, you know what my fascination is with Twitter now. I want to know why Gina Haspel went to Saudi Arabia to talk to the king and not MBS. That's what I want to know, right? We heard about they rounded up a couple of guys at Twitter, and Gina Haspel went to Saudi Arabia the next day to meet with the king, and she met with the king and not MBS, and that was very interesting to me. So something's up with Twitter, and I don't like it. And we know who owns 7% of Twitter more than Jack, and he wants me dead. So
right?
Yeah, so he wants me dead for sure. So so there you go. So that's why we have a patron. That's why we have a patron. Yeah, that's why we have a patron-only hour. Exactly, where we talk about people that want to kill us. So, all right, let's go to the next slide if we could.
There we go.
Okay,
so that's just letting people know where they can find us on Patreon, and then here we are with Scientific American.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't patrons already, Jason does a great job of promoting it, but again, I just want to let you folks know, those of you who are, we're just so incredibly grateful for the support that you've given us, especially through these tough times. Jason, you've put your life on the line, not knowing what you were getting into, walking around New York, and you didn't know how deadly this thing was or wasn't. And quite frankly, I haven't seen another journalist really put their life out there like you did. Nobody really went out into the streets.
Lincoln Kareem has been covering a lot of ground.
Tip of the hat.
He's pretty much picked up the baton. As I've been staying inside, he's been pouring it on. He's uncovering incredible stuff. He was in Queens today, back at that Elmhurst Hospital where Colleen Smith works, and they had a truck set up with a light show like they were having a concert outside the place. People should really go on YouTube and look up Lincoln Kareem if they haven't subscribed to his page already.
All right. Tip of the hat to him. But, I mean, again, seriously, you risked your life getting out there, walking around, trying to figure out what was happening, not knowing how deadly this thing was. And I didn't see a whole lot of journalists doing that. Everybody was kind of, sheltering in place and afraid to go out and investigate, and you weren't. And so you certainly deserve more than a fruit basket for that. This article from Scientific American made my skin crawl. When I read this, I sat back in my chair and said, my God, the breadth, the depth of this Mockingbird thing, it just doesn't end. It just doesn't end. All right. So this article, can you read the title, the headline, and maybe the first sentence to the audience?
Says, comparing COVID-19 deaths to flu deaths is like comparing apples to oranges. The former are actually numbers. The latter are inflated statistical estimates. So,
and that's just simply not true, right? So now, where does an article like this come from? You get an article in Scientific American saying that influenza deaths are estimates and COVID-19 deaths are not. And yet we hear New York saying that they're going back because they had provisional numbers and they're making adjustments and all this other monkey business. Wait a second. The influenza reporting system has been in place for years, right? That's why they took it down when we showcased it on the show, right? The Wonder database. It's been around for a long time. So those aren't estimates. They're not estimating how many people died. That's the mortality database. Yeah. That's how many people died.
It's a stupid article.
Well, it's a stupid article unless you're trying to discredit Crowdsource the Truth, Jason Goodman, John Cullen, Michael Moore, anybody who's investigating this with a critical eye and using critical skills. One of the things we need to share with the audience for just a quick second is something that we've talked about for the Vegas investigation, but haven't talked about here. And that is when deductive reasoning fails. Deductive reasoning is when everything that you're being told kind of adds up, right? 1 + 1 = 2, right? Yeah. And so when everything kind of adds up and things fall into place, it's like, okay, yeah, that sort of makes sense. When things don't add up and the cognitive dissonance kicks in, and you realize that you're not being told the full story and that you're not going to get to see all the evidence, that's when we switch to inductive reasoning. And inductive reasoning is the technique that I used for the most part on the Las Vegas shooting, because we knew we weren't going to get to see all the evidence and that we were only going to see bits and pieces, and some of it was disinformation.
Right.
Same thing here. So same thing here. When your cognitive dissonance kicks in at Javits and we realize, wait a second, the hospitals in New York are not overrun. They're not overrun with coronavirus patients that we need to build a medical facility and bring in boats up the Hudson.
Right.
It's absurd. That, and we're building 114 facilities like Jacob Javits all over the country for these hospital overflow scenarios. So all this cognitive dissonance kicks in. Scientific American starts discrediting any comparison between COVID deaths and influenza deaths.
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci said in 2017, 2018, we had 80,000 people die of influenza. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if right now we're at 85, 90,000 dying from coronavirus, is that an unfair comparison to make, Scientific American? So
how do they even arrive at, when they're talking about the latter, they're talking about flu deaths. How are they inflated statistical estimates?
I have no idea where they're coming up with this. Based on what? Based on what data? Where? Whose opinion is this?
This is Jeremy Samuel Faust.
Mm-hmm. Faust. Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar, Faust, doesn't it? Who do we know named Faust?
Yeah, well, it gets creepy. So,
but I mean, isn't there a famous author named Faust or something?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Who?
Of course.
Who is that? Yeah. I'm thinking of
Faust. Faustian. It's yeah. This is where we get the data from.
Faust is the protagonist of a classic German legend based on the historical Johann Georg Faust. The erudite Faust is a highly successful yet dissatisfied with his life character, leads him to take a pact with the devil. I never heard of this Faust before. Faustian, mm-hmm. I've heard Faust. Maybe I have heard of that and just don't know it. Anyway, okay, so here we got this.
So this is where I'm getting the data from, right? So all the data is coming from the state. So this is California. So this is the California Influenza Surveillance Mortality Database that I get to online. And again, I'm not hacking into any of this. This is all publicly available information. It's wide open, totally available. And you can go and get it and download it and put it into a spreadsheet and add up the numbers. And if you're willing to do the work, you see the results. And when you see the results and you see the bottom line numbers, you kind of look around the room and you're like, well, how is this not news? There's 144,000 people dead from influenza, and that's not a story.
Well, now, wait a minute. See, this influenza surveillance, they keep using that word, surveillance. It's interesting because they started a few weeks ago on this Clinton University or Clinton Foundation University, which is not a legally organized entity. That's just something that Bill Clinton conjured up and decided was a charity against IRS code and the tax exemption they have for the 501c3 that's legally authorized to build and operate a presidential library in Little Rock, Arkansas. They've also got this Clinton Foundation University, and that's the first place I heard about contact tracing. And it's one of those things that you start hearing and you're like, oh, what is that? And then you hear it so much that you just become kind of, oh yeah, there's that thing again. And it's sort of like easing you into it.
We showed it. We showed it here on the show, I think 6 weeks ago, when we showed that Fort Lauderdale simulation with the people that were on the beach in Fort Lauderdale and then where they went from there and the spread.
But that wasn't contact tracing exactly. I'm talking about hiring people to call everybody that you know and track every person. That's the contact tracing that they're talking about.
They do that. They do that in Singapore. They're doing that. You know, that's what they do in Asia.
You're right. Singapore, when I was there, when you would drive in a taxi, there would be these sounds that would go off. And I asked the driver, what is that sound? And he said, oh, these things on the traffic lights are tracking where the car goes. And I was like, what? And then I saw the things. So everywhere you go in that city, you're being surveilled.
Oh, yeah. Oh, in Singapore, if you arrive at the airport and you don't check into your hotel by that evening or something, it's like an all points bulletin goes out for you. It's like they absolutely know that you have to be at the hotel and that kind of thing. If you don't check into the hotel, something's up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, they have hardcore tracking in Singapore, but it is beautiful. Whole country looks like Disney World. It's as clean as a whistle. So just don't spit on the sidewalk. You don't want to do that.
Don't eat go to the next page. On the subway either. It's a $10,000 fine.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go to the next page if we can. We got a lot of good stuff in here.
This one here?
Nope. Next.
Not that one.
Okay. No, we did that one already earlier. Let's keep going.
This one.
Not sure. I can't make that out unless you zoom in for me. It says
percentage of all deaths due to pneumonia and influenza, national summary for 2019 and 2020.
Okay. Can you zoom in a little for me so I can make that out just a little bit? Okay. All right. So this is from the map that we've been looking at week in, week out, and tracking the influenza mortality. And what you see here is it's above the threshold, and it's been above the threshold for some time now. And when it starts to come down, it's because we have incomplete test results. So it's not like this influenza thing has gone away. It has not. This is coming from the influenza mortality system. So it's not like it disappeared. Yet, when we go to the reports from New York and from Michigan, forget about New Jersey, they stopped altogether. But when we look at the reports, to hear it from them, there's no influenza anymore in New York.
Yeah.
Right? New Jersey stops altogether. All right, so let's go to the next slide, because this one's boring. Let's go to the next one. Next one's pretty. They get pretty now. Next one gets pretty.
This is saying, when should clinicians prescribe antiviral drugs for prevention of influenza?
Right. So we've got 144,000 people dead. Again, we have treatment for this. How is it that this went undiscussed? Isn't 144,000 a bigger number than 80,000? Or am I wrong about that?
No, that seems correct.
I heard about new math, but I would think the 144,000. Yeah, I thought the 144,000 would be a bigger problem than the 80,000 problem. Now, I'm not saying the 80,000 problem is not a problem, but 144,000 seems like a bigger problem. Why were people not told to take Tamiflu? What happened?
Wow.
Did Dr. Fauci? Did Dr. Fauci forget? Did he want to come up with a new vaccine?
Well,
Did he
why
not?
did individual doctors not prescribe it? Fauci's obviously not seeing patients.
Okay, so now we get into the illusion. And the illusion is if you're told to look out for coronavirus, 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 it's going to kill everybody. Everybody's dying of coronavirus. Somebody shows up with a respiratory infection, but you can't get any test kits. What do you think it is? What do you think it is?
Well, they were even telling people to say it's coronavirus, right?
Well, you're going to get 39,000. If it might be coronavirus and you stick them on a ventilator, you're going to get 39 grand. I'm not sure what it is, and I can't get the test kit. I don't know. Maybe. Or did New York find a cure to influenza? And that's the solution. Is that why New York has so few influenza cases?
I do find it somewhat difficult to believe that a doctor would knowingly, maliciously put someone on a ventilator if they didn't think it was the right treatment. I don't believe that there are too many doctors around that would do that.
No, I'm not saying it's malicious. I'm not saying it's malicious intent. What I'm saying is you preconditioned everybody to expect coronavirus. Everybody in the hospitals are expecting coronavirus, and it presents as an acute respiratory distress syndrome with pneumonia. It presents very similarly to H1N1. And so without instant testing, somebody comes in with a fever, it sounds like pneumonia, they put the stethoscope on, they hear all the gurgling and stuff inside. They assume it's COVID because that's what the big emergency is right now on television is COVID, not influenza.
And if
so
you
I'm not saying that.
Remember, John, even when I was walking around, an EMT, at least one, and a doctor both said to me, well, if you watch the news or what I saw on the news or what the governor said. So that should help people understand how, these doctors are people. They're not perfect. And when they hear something on the news and their families and their wives and husbands and brothers and children and parents or everybody's freaking out, they're affected by this.
Absolutely. And remember, January, February, March, we've got 4,000 people every week dying of influenza. So were the hospitals somewhat full with respiratory issues in March? Yes. And it kind of creates, again, you got to think of this as kind of illusion type stuff. It creates kind of like a preloaded spring. I've got people in beds already with respiratory stuff, right? And now they're telling me about this coronavirus. Anybody who shows up in that emergency room, they're assuming it's corona. And the fact that the news media didn't stay on top of the influenza story, and the fact that Dr. Fauci didn't, is criminal, I think. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx really need to answer for this. And that's why I keep trying to put this in perspective of the losses that we've suffered in wars. We got so upset about Vietnam, about Korea, about Afghanistan, about Iraq, and we have more people dead this season than all those wars combined. That to me is tragic. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined don't equal how many people we have dead from influenza and coronavirus this year. And I think Dr. Fauci owes America an explanation as to how do you have 144,000 people dead from influenza when we have Tamiflu?
Very quickly,
how
John,
does that?
We've got Finn in the comments telling us that, I don't know if it's a him or a her, but Finn's father was in the hospital and they insisted on intubating the father against the family's wishes. So putting the father on a ventilator where he remains in the ICU, that's not good.
No. So again, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. We don't give medical advice on the show. But what we do is we repeat things that we've heard from other doctors. And that's reporting, right? And I can certainly tell you what I've heard other doctors say is that turning people over when they're intubated onto their stomachs rather than their backs, that they've seen positive results from that. I've heard that, but I'm not a doctor, but I've heard that reported by other doctors. And also, I would be determined to be absolutely certain that the infection was one rather than the other. And meaning, might oseltamivir work? And there are other treatments, in fact, for H1N1 besides Tamiflu. But again, the fact that we've got 144,000 dead, CDC doesn't want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge it. They want to delete the database. They want to take the website down. They don't want anybody talking about it. And they're going to just throw out estimated numbers. And we're looking at the mortality database. We're in the mortality database. And this question is tragic. I sent you a couple little video clips. One of them looked like a donut. And that donut is showing week to week to week in the United States the outbreak, and you're going to see how H1N1. If you can, maybe you can zoom into the legend.
I can't.
What you'll see is
in on a video, actually.
Oh, right. Okay, but maybe I think it's the orange is H1N1, and as it goes on, you're going to see how the H1N1 becomes the dominant virus during the outbreak. So this is weekly outbreak in the United States. And which viruses are the dominant viruses? And now you see H1N1 is now dominating. And this should have been, the alarm should have been going off. This is a killer virus, man. This is H1N1. This is the Spanish flu. We have 144,000 people dead from Bill Gates' Spanish flu. The one he was talking about at TED killed 144,000 people this year. And Bill Gates isn't talking about it. And Dr. Fauci's not talking about it. And Dr. Birx isn't talking about it. And I don't like it one bit. And what I want to know is, when New York went from so many influenza deaths to so few, was that because they were distributing Tamiflu? And that's a question I'd like to pose to that director of the health department that doesn't care about the cops. I'd like to ask. I'd like to find out, what was the secret there. So, again, what we've seen here is a dramatic influenza outbreak. You can let that run. Yeah, you just hit play. So we've seen a dramatic influenza outbreak in the United States. And, the question is, nobody mentions it. It doesn't get dealt with. I understand coronavirus is serious, but we've got 144,000 people dead, and this is, the dirtiest secret nobody wants to talk about. So in the Senate sessions the other day, when they were talking to Dr. Fauci, and each one of the senators had 5 minutes to ask questions, nobody asks him.
Right.
Well, nobody asks a simple question of Dr. Fauci: is it true? Is it true there's 144,000 people dead from influenza this year? Is it true that there's how many people dead in Hong Kong? How many people are dead in India? Right? How is it that New Jersey has more people dead than Pakistan? How is that possible, Dr. Fauci? Is it possible? Or let's go to the next. One of the slides in the deck I sent you, somewhere in the deck, I guess I didn't put the slides in.
We ran through the full deck.
Oh, the whole deck? Yeah. Okay. I thought I had some colorful.
But you still have this video. This video remains.
Right. This one is from New York Magazine. This is just showing. You can let it play. This just shows the COVID deaths and how many daily deaths. But what's interesting about it is it's time based. So it shows you when we get to 1,000 deaths per day, and that in late March and mid March, the number of people dying. So like right now, if you hit pause on March 12th. Or March 17th, you see that the number of people dying per day is somewhat nominal, right? You can scrub back a little bit. And you see that mid-March, we've got a daily number of people dying. And we know that when the president declared a national emergency in all 50 states, we had 204 people dead already. And how many people dying per, and you see how it goes up and goes up and goes up as this thing
This is the exact animation that David Hawkins was showing earlier today from a BBC article, except it was talking about each country's death numbers. This is just the New Yorker replacing the data and using the same animation engine.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the animation engine is a commonly used engine.
Right.
It's a successful company, so it's. I would say, yeah, that's common.
Not that
So,
surprising,
so
I guess.
yeah, exactly. So, uh, again, the gist of it is that these five states, New York. Um, in fact, I sent you a home one of the zip files. I think there's a bunch of PDFs in there. We've got like all the reports from these guys, and I wanted to show the audience the actual
The
reports. Let's see if you
reports.
can
Yeah.
open them.
There
Yeah.
you go. There's one.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, I mean, these are the goods. I've got every one of them. I've got every single week's report from every one of these states: New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Michigan. I've got them all. And all of a sudden, the president announces we're going to reimburse you $39,000. And it's like everybody forgot they had a cat. They stopped feeding the cat. How do you do that? How do you just ignore this influenza outbreak because of COVID? Is it because of the $39,000? Is that what it was? And you guys just completely ignored this outbreak because you were getting $39,000 reimbursement? Is that what happened, or is it something
No.
else?
Yeah, there's got to be
Nah,
something
right. I
else.
couldn't be right, right. So maybe it was Tamiflu. Maybe they started distributing Tamiflu the second or third week in March. And that's how the numbers just went straight down like that.
No.
So the point is, these states, their reports don't match the mortality database. And again, they're hoping nobody checks their work against the mortality database. When we look at these reports, all of a sudden they say we don't have any influenza activity. Not according to the maps. According to your coroners and your medical examiners, you've got plenty of it. So this is nonsense. And we've got it. It's already downloaded. It's already archived. And it's 7 states, the 5 big ones. Basically, when you take away those 5 big states, you take away New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Governor Whitmer, Newsom in California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, take away those states, America has done better than Spain, better than Italy, better than France. You take those 5 states away, we've done amazing. Those 5 states, worse than everybody. New York is worse than India plus Pakistan plus Bangladesh plus China plus Russia. That's New York. And they're talking about Cuomo for president.
No, that cannot happen. I want to talk for a second, John, if I can redirect the conversation slightly about this woman. I think her name is pronounced Osiris Barbeau, right?
I only heard about her recently because she said
she got
she
into a dust
quote
up
about
with
the
the
cops.
police union saying she doesn't care about the cops or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
That's all I heard.
I'm just reading about her for the first time. She's the commissioner of health for the city of New York. So she's definitely someone we want to ask about this response to COVID-19. She was born at Bellevue Hospital, which has been mentioned quite a lot. And she refers to herself as a New Yorican, which is a term of pride used by New Yorkers who have roots in Puerto Rico. I thought it was an insult, so I don't know if that's accurate. But
I've been to Puerto Rico, and it's beautiful, and I've been to Bellevue.
I have no issue with Puerto Rican people or Puerto Rico, but whenever I've heard New Yorker Rican, I don't say that to Puerto Rican people. I understood it was an insult. Her father committed suicide with a handgun when she was 9. I did not know that.
Ooh.
And she lived in the Patterson House in the Bronx, which is, I guess, it's a public housing development, kind of one of these low-income government housing things. And she did her pediatric residency at George Washington University. The part of this that I was looking for that I couldn't remember off the top of my head is that she served as the medical director of the Office of School Health at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Now, this is something that I've noticed around New York City. I saw the building, the Department of New York Health and Mental Hygiene, and I mean, What do you think of that word, John? Mental hygiene? That sounds very George Orwell, 1984. Like we need to scrub your brain. You have a dirty mental hygiene.
All right, you opened the rabbit hole. Do you want to go down? What's the number one selling, number two selling, and number three selling prescription medication in America? Can you pull that up?
Probably
top selling prescription medications.
Xanax or something?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Top selling prescription medications in America. What are they?
No, probably Viagra.
Well, I don't know. I'm not.
Top
I don't want to guess.
In general, the top of the list. Ooh, Humira. I've done 3D videos for Humira. That's an anti.
Can we get a top 10?
Thing.
Can we get a top 10?
Top 20 drugs in 2018 by sales from Fierce Pharma.
That's perfect. Show me what we got. Okay.
Humira.
Top 3. What is that? Humira. What's that for?
Humira
I have no idea.
Was invented to treat arthritis, and then we made a video for it when it got a new indication for Crohn's disease. So it's an anti-inflammatory.
Okay. And what's the next one?
Revlimid, I've never heard of.
Okay. Next.
Enbrel.
Okay. Next.
Rituzin from Roche. Opdivo from Bristol Myers. I mean, it's not like penicillin or something like that. All of this stuff I've never heard of. Lyrica from Pfizer.
So we don't see Prozac, Zoloft. Those aren't up there anymore. No more.
But I don't know what SSRIs. Any of these do.
Okay. I was expecting that you would see a bunch of SSRIs up at the top. I was thinking you'd see Zoloft and Prozac and
we don't know
Wellbutrin.
But Humira is just totally 13.68 billion. Wow.
So it's for arthritis. Arthritis is pretty.
I guess arthritis and Crohn's disease. I don't know. That's a lot of prescriptions of Humira.
Yeah, arthritis is a big deal. So I was expecting you'd see more SSRIs, and I don't know. I mean, one of the things I keep wondering is, how is it that so few people seem to care? How is it that so few people seem to give a damn when the government is lying to the people to this degree? And again, I really feel in the last 2.5 years, you and your family have changed criminology. The way these cases are investigated now has completely changed. And I don't think the professors of criminology really realize it yet. That this model is so difficult to compete with yesterday's methods. When you look at, what the FBI and these guys are chartered with to solve these types of cases, and what you've been able to bring to the table with this army of independent journalists and investigators and everybody with a camera. I mean, you're the hub, right? And you've got all the spokes on the wheel, but then each one of us has got our army of informants and sources and eyes and ears sending us videos and links and documents and stuff. And so this is unprecedented. I really feel like we are changing criminology. And when I say we, it's the audience. You have brought, you're over 100,000 subscribers now, right? So you've brought together an audience of people who give a damn, who, are putting their foot down and saying, this just can't go on. This type of stuff is not acceptable. And I think you've pulled together a group of investigative journalists and patriots really quite second to none when you look at your family and the people you're doing shows with, and the breaks and the data and the research that people are doing. I mean, quite frankly, Jason, I don't know that there's anybody doing what you're doing. I mean,
I couldn't do it without you, John, and all the co-contributors.
I'm just one spoke. Me and my little army of, we're just one spoke on your wheel. And we're grateful to be here and to contribute. And when you look at, again, and you look at Ole and you look at, the stuff he's bringing to the table and Michael Moore and all these other guys, it's remarkable. And again, a tip of the hat to you for making all this possible. I'm happy I can contribute the little bit I can to try and shed some light on this. But again, when I'm looking at this data and I'm looking at these reports and I'm digging in, Something's not right here. We had the
Yeah, I
worst
agree.
influenza outbreak in 100 years. And all these COVID deaths, I think we have to put a question mark next to them and say, wait. Did we
Yeah.
really have 80,000 people die from coronavirus? I don't know. I don't know.
I don't
But
know either. We did get a good suggestion from the chat here, which was to look up not the most, uh, not the best selling, but the most prescribed. Because I guess maybe if they're
okay.
less expensive, that might.
hmm
But
hmm
most prescribed
Yeah.
drugs.
I mean,
Uh,
George Carlin said nobody seems to care, right? It was one of the lines from his show. Nobody seems to care. And these things just keep happening. I think when the
amoxicillin,
Pentagon, yeah, well, that's good.
Adderall, Xanax,
So Adderall,
prednisone.
Adderall, so Adderall would explain why everybody's got ADD and why we need the news cycle to change every 5 minutes. Right? If everybody's taking Adderall, and everybody's got adult
I thought it's
onset
supposed to
ADD,
calm you down, Adderall.
I think it's supposed to, but who knows what happens there. So
Wow.
all I know is there's a handful of people that seem to be willing to put their foot down. And it just seems like most people just want to get on with their lives. They don't want to hear the side of the story that's unpleasant,
Right. Well,
that's
they get
not part of
angry.
the
Some people
narrative.
get angry.
Absolutely. Cognitive dissonance and selective perception. If it's outside the scope of what they think the story should be and you start challenging the narrative, so many people think Dr. Fauci is the guy. I'm with
I know.
Fauci. And I'm looking at him like he's a cross between Dr. Mengele and Stalin. He's got 250,000 people dead, and he's carrying it on.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I think he needs to be held accountable. I could be wrong.
Brad Pitt loves him.
I don't get it. Brad Pitt's not doing the math. Does Brad Pitt understand that Dr. Fauci has 235,000 people dead this season? This season.
I think Brad Pitt is a good actor, and there might not be that much more going on.
Brad Pitt's got an amazing motorcycle collection, and one day he and I will talk about our common friend. So,
But well, John, I mean, it's been another great presentation. There's a lot of questions that have come up, and I do appreciate you being a part of this Crowdsource the Truth family. We couldn't do it without all the viewers, because what happens is we talk about these ideas. I bring up something like Allison Fauci being a computer programmer at Twitter and finding my follow so quickly and blocking me and changing the status of her Twitter account, not because I'm trying to go after Dr. Fauci's daughter, but because that's notable. And also at age 33, she's an adult who, she's not like his little kid. And if she's working at Twitter and Twitter is blocking and banning people like Laura Loomer and you've been blocked from Twitter. They need to be called out. I don't understand why she needs to keep those tweets private. I mean, they're her tweets. It's up to her. But it's interesting that Adam Schiff is following her with a lesser known Adam Schiff account. I don't know if a lot of people knew about that Adam Schiff account and I just missed it. Perhaps I was distracted, but there's so much going on, John.
Yeah, still haven't heard Adam Schiff or Nancy Pelosi or Newsom really thank the president for building those 8 temporary hospitals in California. The president put 8 temporary hospitals in California.
Why?
I never heard a thank you. I never heard a thank you. Well, we know why, but we're so far ahead of the story with that right now people need to understand the difference between COVID and influenza. And once everybody sees through that part, then we'll go to the next layer, the layer cake, and understand why we built 114 hospitals that stood for 10 days and then we broke them down.
Yeah.
Because that had, and we told everybody these are not for coronavirus patients.
Yeah.
These are not for coronavirus patients. So, again, it's often the same sort of thing again and again and again. And when they took down that database and then they put it back up without last year's data in it, I just you know what it reminded me of? When Flight Radar, when they changed the Flight
Right.
Radar recording. It's like we
No, I think
showed
there's
it
a
on
lot
the
of things
show.
like that happening. I've gone back to the Internet Archive. I was looking
Right.
for a website, maybe from this company. A lot of people were talking earlier about how Donald Trump has appointed a new former pharmaceutical executive to be part of his coronavirus task force.
Yeah, the
And it was in the
vaccine.
New York
Yeah.
Times earlier. And this is a guy who he was an executive with this company. I need to get my information prepared a little bit more here before we dig into this. But
You know what?
it's,
Why don't we?
yeah.
Why don't we talk? How about if I prepare something next week for that topic? How about if I do that? Because I'm fascinated by this, right? This engineering, the bioengineering, the CRISPR, and the manufacturing of these viruses that are patented, and then
Well, it's
what
not just
can
viruses.
we do with them?
The thing
Well, I know.
I'm
I
becoming
mean, take it
so
to this next
interested
level.
in- here's the guy. So this is Monsef Slaoui, former pharmaceutical executive. He's somehow connected to this company called, I'm forgetting the name of it here. I think I've got it on this screen over here. The company, it's basically involved in what's called bioelectronic medicine, which is a new field of medicine that it's called Galvani. Let's look at this for just a quick second. Galvani Bio.
No, I love this. So this is similar to the professor at Harvard who was arrested, was working on these electromechanical objects that are at the size of a virus type level, right? I mean, can you help me?
Yeah.
Nanotechnology.
So what Charles Lieber was doing is he is an expert in nanotechnology, and his group was developing robots, mechanical devices made out of DNA that are themselves smaller than viruses. Now, what this Galvani Bioelectronics company tells us on their own website is that Galvani Bioelectronics is a new company established in November of 2016, dedicated to the development of bioelectronic medicines, a new class of medicines consisting of miniaturized implantable devices. Now, this is astounding to me because they're telling us that they can implant devices in your body that are going to deliver music.
This is what I want to investigate
medicine.
for next week. Medicine, not music. But this is what I want to investigate for next week's show. I want to dig into this, and I want to dig into the doctor at Harvard and this type of development, because one of the things we keep hearing about and seeing are these doctors talking about the patents, and we've talked about the glycoprotein patents, the spike protein patents on Ebola, on HIV, on coronaviruses, and how various doctors are patenting various spike proteins on these various viruses. Well, if we can do that, I mean, we looked at that T4 phage a couple weeks ago, and one of the things I said was, that's natural. That just happened by accident in some pond scum one day, and this is a Darwinian thing, or is there more to it when you look at this T4 phage? And so the question then becomes, if the T4 phage is a naturally occurring thing, might it also be the motivation? Might it also be the muse?
The inspiration. Yeah.
The inspiration for a new type of similar type of thing.
A device.
But now that we know that the legs are made out of adenine and guanine and cytosine, and if we put them together in this combination, it makes those little legs. And we know that we can make the spike out of this and that. And my question is, are those doctors like Dr. Q and those other doctors, the Bat Lady, is that what these guys are doing? Are they engineering viruses to get in. Like, so for example, we've talked, and we should probably wrap up with this.
Well,
One of the
let's
things we
just
talked
play
about.
this for a minute, John, because they're talking about it right here.
Self-assemble. At the end, we get a custom desired shape.
That's it.
Here's how the nanorobot works.
The nanorobot that we designed actually looks like an open-ended barrel or a clamshell that has two halves. So the two halves of this open-ended barrel or a clamshell are linked together by flexible DNA hinges, and the entire structure is held shut by latches or locks that are actually DNA double helices.
In order to load a payload, we need to first
Right, so what these guys are talking
DNA.
about is that they've developed a little package that can be hidden inside fat cells and stuff so that it's not,
it's a
self-attack.
It's a synthetic virus. It's a synthetic virus. What they're doing is they're creating synthetic. It's what it is. It's a synthetic virus. They're making a synthetic virus.
Well, wait. Let's be a bit more precise. They're making a device that can enter the body, find a target cell, open up, and release a payload into that cell. That payload could be a pharmaceutical. It could be some chemical that causes a cell to do something or not do something. And I'm very concerned about this technology because I didn't decide that this is what this thing does. They're telling us that this little package goes inside, they trigger it to open, and this payload inside comes out and does what? We have no idea.
This is the next generation, however. The current generation is in your influenza vaccine today.
No, this isn't the next generation. This video is from years ago. This could be in anything.
Okay. Today's influenza vaccines take an influenza virus, they cut it in half, they take half of its DNA or RNA, whatever it is, and they put it inside of a benign coronavirus. The benign coronavirus acts as the delivery mechanism to get into our cells, deliver that RNA or DNA half strand, and CRISPR takes place inside of our bodies. Yeah. And again, I keep saying, I don't think the CDC is explaining this to people, that when you get an influenza vaccine, you are having your DNA modified. Your DNA is getting modified using CRISPR. And they're using coronaviruses, not this coronavirus, but a supposedly benign coronavirus, to enter the cells. And the way they target which cells it's going to enter is by patenting and designing those glycoproteins, those spike proteins. So based on the configuration of the spike protein, it can target a certain cell. But again, when we look at those T4 phages, and we looked at that animation a couple of weeks ago, I'll prepare it again for next week. Again, a bunch of guys like this with their skills have the ability to create those kind of machines, these nano machines, these nano robots, and then deliver a payload, and you're told it's a vaccine.
Right.
You're told it's a vaccine. You've got no idea what the hell's going on. It's unreal.
And the last thing I want to share with you, John, before we wrap it up. So that was a video from Harvard's Wyss Institute. And when you Google Wyss Institute, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we find this article from 2013. Hans-Jörg Wyss signed the Giving Pledge. She's among 7 families and individuals who today announced they're joining the Giving Pledge by committing to give half or more of their wealth to charity. Now in its 4th year and totaling 122 signatories, which seems to be mathematically related to 144,000, and someone in the chat said something about the Bible talking about 144,000. But the Giving Pledge is a long-term global initiative created by Warren Buffett and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or Bill and Melinda Gates themselves. So this guy Wyss is definitely involved with Bill and Melinda Gates. Here's a quote saying, "In this season of giving, we're inspired by the millions of people across the globe who give what they can in meaningful and significant ways," said Melinda Gates, Pledge co-founder and co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Giving Pledge is rooted in this spirit and hopes to inspire people to tackle problems that are inherently difficult. So they've got all this money, and the new pledge signatories announced today coming from around the globe, in addition to WIS, include Beth and Seth Klarman, Liz and Eric Lefkowski, Richard Edwin, Nancy Peary Marriott. Marriott was involved in Event 201. Did you know that?
It wouldn't surprise me. Marriott owns the Ritz-Carlton, where MBS had everybody. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All these
yeah.
connections,
Of course.
John. It's amazing.
Just remember, you have to remember, everything you see, it's an illusion. Okay? It's not what you think. What you're seeing on TV is not what you think.
Absolutely right. John, another great presentation. We're turning over a lot of stones, finding a lot of information. We'll be back next week for the sponsor exclusive show. I want to thank all the generous Subscribestar and Patreon sponsors who make this and every show on Crowdsource the Truth possible. People can go to subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen or patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and you can go back and review all of the episodes of John Cullen's coronavirus investigation and John Cullen's Las Vegas investigation. You can see all of that and more, of course, on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I want to thank everybody who has become a viewer sponsor, keeping this information flowing freely. We don't have corporate sponsors who spike stories or tell us what to talk about and what not to talk about. And I want to thank everybody for making that happen. People are asking me if I'm going to